In a future where Earth has become a hub of intergalactic exploration, humanity stands among the stars, its technological prowess reaching new heights. Space travel, once a distant dream, is now a part of everyday life. Humanity's colonies dot distant planets, and Earth serves as the beating heart of a vast interstellar alliance. This is a world where humans have evolved beyond their planetary confines, taking their first steps toward becoming a major player in the cosmic order. Earth's history is defined by wars, revolutions, and the human spirit's unbreakable drive to survive and thrive. Their tenacity has allowed them to adapt and overcome challenges that most species would find insurmountable. The alien species known as the Lyrians are quite different from humanity. Originating from a distant world rich in culture and royal heritage, they are a peaceful race, valuing tradition and order. The Lyrians are led by a noble family, the heart of their civilization. However, their world is now on the brink of collapse. A devastating war has ravaged their home planet, leaving them vulnerable and scattered across the galaxy. Among those caught in the aftermath are two alien princesses, young, unprepared for the chaos, and now fugitives in a universe that seems to offer little refuge. The fall of their once great civilization has left them stranded, their lives hanging by a thread. Enter the human protagonist. He is a man of few words, yet his presence commands attention. Physically strong, yes, but it's his sharp mind and deep sense of compassion that truly define him. Having served in multiple Earth campaigns and worked as a diplomat among alien species, his understanding of cultures and survival skills are unparalleled. He is not driven by ego or the desire for recognition, but rather by a quiet belief that life, no matter whose, deserves protection. When faced with difficult decisions, his willpower and empathy guide him, making him the perfect embodiment of human resilience. In him, the essence of what makes humanity extraordinary is clear. As the human travels through a desolate sector of space, his ship's sensors pick up a faint, irregular signal. It's a distress call, weak and desperate. It comes from an alien ship, the Lyrian Royal Escape Vessel. The human recognizes the Lyrian symbols, knowing all too well about their recent downfall. His first thought is to ignore it. He's not a soldier anymore, not a hero looking for another fight. But then something stops him. A nagging sense of responsibility, a deeply ingrained part of human nature, compels him to turn toward the signal. There's something about the cry for help that he can't shake. Perhaps it's the knowledge that no one else will come, that these are lives hanging in the balance. The Lyrians, once regal, are now refugees, and humanity has always had a soft spot for the underdog. He docks with their ship, its systems barely holding together. Inside, he finds the two princesses, their regal bearing diminished by fear and exhaustion. They're young, clearly not warriors, and they've been running for far too long. The human surveys the situation quickly. Their ship's power is failing, their location is compromised, and worse, they are being hunted. The enemy, a technologically superior alien race, has set its sights on wiping out the Lyrian royal family entirely. The human assesses the risk. If he helps, he too will be marked for death. But leaving them behind would be to sentence them to certain doom. His decision is made in an instant. He will help them. The Lyrian princesses, however, are not entirely convinced. They've been raised to believe that humans, while physically impressive, are crude compared to their more advanced culture. Their initial reaction is one of skepticism. What could this human, with his primitive-looking technology, possibly do against their enemies, who possess far superior weaponry and ships? They've heard stories of humans, of course, stories of their resilience, their unpredictable nature, but those are just stories. Their survival now depends on something more concrete than myths. Undeterred, the human begins making quick modifications to their ship, assessing the situation with a clarity that surprises the princesses. He works methodically, his hands moving with purpose as he repurposes parts of his own vessel to boost theirs. To the Lyrians, this is nothing short of miraculous. What they see as improvisation, the human knows as problem-solving under pressure, an inherent human trait that has seen their species through countless crises. He doesn't rely on advanced tech alone. Instead, He uses his deep knowledge of engineering and battlefield tactics to maximize their chances. The princesses watch in awe as the human ship's systems mesh seamlessly with their own, patching power surges and stabilizing the failing engines. In minutes, he's done what they thought was impossible. There's a moment of realization, a shift in their perception. This human isn't like others they've encountered. He is different. Under the pressure of an imminent threat, his ability to adapt is beyond anything they've seen. The human isn't done yet. As they prepare to make their escape, the reality of the situation becomes clear. The enemies hunting them are ruthless and well-equipped. These are no ordinary foes. They are a technologically advanced alien race whose sole mission is to erase the last remnants of the Lyrian royal family. The human knows that in a head-on confrontation, they stand no chance. The enemy's weapons are more advanced, their ships faster, and their numbers greater. But this doesn't faze him. He's been outmatched before and lived to tell the tale. The human's confidence isn't born from arrogance, but from experience. He's seen too many battles where the odds were overwhelmingly stacked against him. What sets humans apart, he knows, isn't just their physical strength or their weapons. It's their creativity, their resilience, and their ability to think in ways that others don't. The human mind, capable of lateral thinking and improvisation, has always been their greatest asset in warfare. And it's this asset he plans to use now. As the Lyrian's pursuers close in, the human hatches a plan. It's risky, no, it's downright dangerous, but it's their best shot. He calmly explains the strategy to the princesses, who listen intently, still somewhat skeptical but no longer doubting his resolve. He will use the enemy's technological superiority against them, exploiting the weaknesses in their seemingly perfect systems. It's a tactic that has served humanity well throughout history, finding the cracks in even the most advanced armor. The tension builds as the enemy's ships come into view. The human, calm and collected, makes the necessary adjustments. Every move is calculated, every decision made with the precision of someone who has lived through impossible situations. The Lyrians, now fully reliant on this strange human, braced themselves for the battle ahead. The human wasted no time. The situation was dire, and survival depended on his ability to think quickly and act decisively. Drawing from his vast experience, he immediately began formulating a plan. The ship was damaged, and its systems were failing, but he knew that even in the worst conditions, there were always solutions if one was willing to improvise. In his years of space travel and survival missions, he had learned to make do with whatever was available, and this time would be no different. His first priority was to stabilize the ship enough to make a quick escape. The enemy was closing in, and they had little time. With the Lyrian princesses watching anxiously, he began using rudimentary tools, scavenged parts, and sheer ingenuity to make repairs. The tools he had were far from ideal, and the alien technology was unfamiliar, but that didn't stop him. He had dealt with alien tech before, and while it was far more advanced than anything humans had developed, he knew there were always workarounds. His hands moved swiftly, and with every adjustment, he explained what he was doing in calm, measured tones. The princesses, still shaken from their ordeal, were astonished. They had grown up in a world where technology did all the thinking for them, where problems were solved by machines and specialists. Seeing a human use such basic tools to modify their ship in ways they hadn't thought possible left them speechless. His ability to adapt, to improvise, and to fix what seemed irreparably broken was something they hadn't encountered before. They had never seen someone turn a pile of scrap into a functioning part of a starship, yet here he was, doing exactly that. Soon enough, the ship was functional again, not perfect, but enough to give them a fighting chance. With the engine sputtering to life, the humans signaled the princesses to brace themselves. This was going to be a rough escape. He had bought them some time, but the enemy was relentless, and they wouldn't stop until the princesses were captured or worse. They launched into the void of space, leaving behind the ruins of the battlefield, but their journey was far from over. The chase had only just begun. As they raced through the stars, the human began modifying the ship's systems on the fly. The Lyrian ship was built with technology far more advanced than what humans were used to, but that didn't deter him. He studied the systems quickly, figuring out how to tweak the ship's energy distribution and reroute power to essential functions. While the alien systems were superior in many ways, they had one flaw: they were overly complex. The Lyrians relied too much on their technology's sophistication, while the human understood that simplicity often led to greater flexibility in times of crisis. The princesses watched in amazement as he continued to make adjustments mid-flight. With every move, he pushed the ship beyond its limits, squeezing out more speed and power than the designers had intended. The ship's advanced systems, which had been optimized for efficiency and comfort, were now being pushed to the edge of functionality. It was risky, but the human knew that risk was better than certainty of capture. This was where human ingenuity shined, the ability to use limited resources, to bend the rules of design, and to think in ways that even the most advanced alien minds hadn't anticipated. With the ship temporarily boosted, the human began navigating through treacherous territory. The space ahead was riddled with asteroid fields, gravitational anomalies, and debris from previous battles. It was dangerous to venture into such areas, but he knew the enemy would be cautious in following them. The enemy ships, with their superior technology, would be too rigid in their approach, too reliant on their systems to make it through unscathed. The human, on the other hand, could adapt. He could think on his feet, adjusting course on the fly, using his instincts rather than relying solely on the ship's sensors. As they entered the hazardous zone, the tension on board was palpable. The princesses, though still unsure of what awaited them, began to trust the human's judgment. They saw in him something they had never seen in their own people: a willingness to take calculated risks, to step into the unknown with confidence rather than fear. The human's ability to remain calm under pressure was in stark contrast to their own people, who would have hesitated in such a situation. The enemy's ships pursued, but as the human had predicted, they struggled to navigate the treacherous space. Their reliance on technology made them vulnerable, as their ship's automated systems struggled to compensate for the unpredictable environment. The human used every opportunity to exploit this weakness, guiding their ship through narrow passages and dangerous anomalies that the enemy couldn't follow. The princesses marveled at his piloting skills, realizing that while their enemies had superior ships, they lacked the intuition and adaptability that humans possessed. With each evasive maneuver, the human gained precious moments of distance. He wasn't just relying on the ship's systems, he was using his knowledge of physics, his understanding of tactics, and his deep experience in space combat to outthink the enemy at every turn. It wasn't brute force or superior firepower that was keeping them alive. It was his ability to think several steps ahead, to anticipate the enemy's moves and counter them before they even happened. As the chase wore on, the enemy became more desperate, pushing their ships harder in an attempt to close the gap. But this only played into the human's hands. He knew that desperation led to mistakes, and mistakes could be exploited. He began laying traps, using the environment around them to his advantage. A well-timed maneuver sent an asteroid crashing into one of the enemy's ships, forcing the others to slow down. Another quick turn led them through a field of space debris, which their pursuers' advanced sensors failed to navigate. The humans' tactics weren't just about survival, they were about psychological warfare. He knew that by constantly staying one step ahead, he was wearing down the enemy's morale. The alien commanders, confident in their technological superiority, had underestimated the human's ability to turn a seemingly hopeless situation into an opportunity for victory. The princesses, who had once doubted him, now saw the brilliance in his strategy. He wasn't just trying to escape, he was systematically outthinking and outmaneuvering the enemy at every turn. As the pursuit dragged on, the human knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The ship was still damaged, and their temporary boosts in performance wouldn't last much longer. But for now, they had bought themselves enough time to escape immediate danger. The enemy ships, battered and struggling to keep up, were forced to regroup, giving the human and the princesses a brief respite. For the first time since the chase began, there was a moment of calm on board. The princesses looked at the human with a newfound respect. He had not only saved their lives but had done so in a way that defied their expectations of what a human could achieve. His resourcefulness, his ability to adapt under pressure, and his refusal to give up had proven that humanity was not to be underestimated. As the tension of the chase began to ebb, a fragile calm settled over the ship. The princesses, who had spent the entire ordeal in uncertainty and fear, now saw the human with new eyes. Their initial skepticism had given way to cautious admiration. They had never expected a human to possess such depth of character, especially in the face of overwhelming odds. The survival instinct they had always heard defined humanity was clearly present, but there was something more, something they hadn't anticipated. This human wasn't just surviving, he was driven by a deeper sense of responsibility, empathy, and courage. In the quiet moments between their desperate escape and the looming threat still hanging over them, they began to speak with him. Their conversations were tentative at first, each side testing the waters, but soon they delved deeper. The princesses, raised in a culture that prized order and hierarchy, found the human's view of the universe profoundly different from their own. He spoke of Earth's long history, of its countless challenges and hardships. From ancient wars and global crises to personal stories of survival and triumph, his perspective was one shaped by adversity. Yet, what stood out most to the princesses was the human capacity for hope, even in the darkest times. He explained how Earth, a small blue planet in a vast and often unforgiving galaxy, had always been at a disadvantage. With no advanced technology or inherent natural advantages, humans had been forced to rely on their wits, their ingenuity, and their unbreakable spirit. Over centuries, they had fought wars not just against each other but against nature itself. Yet, despite these struggles, they had emerged stronger, unified by a shared belief that they could always overcome, no matter the odds. To the princesses, this was a revelation. Their own people had always relied on the stability of their royal heritage and advanced technology to guide them. The human, however, demonstrated a kind of strength they had never known, one that came from within, not from external power or privilege. As trust grew, the princesses opened up about their own fears and the burdens of their royal lineage. The weight of responsibility they carried as the last surviving members of their family was immense. They had always been taught that their lives were valuable because of their bloodline, their status as leaders. Yet, here was a human who seemed to value life for its own sake, regardless of status or rank. It was a profound shift in their worldview. In the human's eyes, it wasn't their royal title that made them worth saving, it was simply that they were lives in need of protection. This growing bond was soon tested. As they continued their journey, they stumbled upon a group of alien civilians caught in the crossfire of the same enemies who had been pursuing the princesses. The civilians were helpless, unarmed, and terrified. The human, always scanning the horizon for threats, spotted them first. Immediately, he knew that stopping to help would put their own escape in jeopardy. The enemies were relentless, and any delay could cost them the narrow lead they had gained. The rational choice was clear: keep moving and ensure the safety of the princesses. But something within him couldn't allow that. The human faced a moral dilemma, one that went to the very core of his values. It wasn't just about the princesses anymore, it was about innocent lives that hung in the balance. He weighed the risks quickly but thoroughly. On one hand, these civilians had no connection to their mission. Saving them would delay their escape, possibly leading to their capture. On the other hand, leaving them behind would mean certain death. It was a decision no alien would have questioned. Logic dictated that the mission, protecting the royal lineage, came first. But humans weren't wired that way. For the human protagonist, life was life, and every life was worth saving, no matter the personal cost. Without hesitation, he altered their course. The princesses, initially shocked by his decision, questioned him. Why take such a risk for beings they didn't even know? His answer was simple yet profound. In the human experience, morality wasn't always about self-interest, or even survival. Sometimes, it was about doing what was right, even if it made no sense on the surface. For humans, this was not an exceptional act, it was just part of who they were. Guided by this belief, the human maneuvered the ship to assist the civilians. It was a dangerous move, exposing them to enemy fire, but he pressed forward. The princesses, watching his actions unfold, began to understand the depth of human compassion in a way they had never seen before. This wasn't about strategy or royal protocol. This was about one individual willing to risk everything for the sake of others. They watched as he fought with everything he had, using every resource at his disposal to protect the vulnerable. When the battle was over, the civilians were safe, but the human had sustained significant injuries in the process. He had pushed himself and the ship beyond their limits, and the consequences were evident. Yet, even in his weakened state, he brushed off concerns for his own safety. He had done what needed to be done, and to him, that was enough. For the first time, the princesses truly saw the human not just as a protector but as a being of immense moral strength. His actions went beyond mere survival. They reflected a deep commitment to a greater good. The princesses, who had been raised to see themselves as superior due to their royal blood, began to reevaluate everything they had been taught. Here was a human, a being they had once considered inferior in both technology and status, who had shown them what true leadership looked like. It wasn't about commanding armies or controlling vast resources. It was about compassion, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand up for what was right, even when it came at great personal cost. As the ship drifted into safer territory, the bond between the human and the princesses had solidified. They no longer saw him as just a protector but as someone worthy of their deepest respect and admiration. His decisions had not only saved their lives but had also opened their eyes to a broader understanding of what it meant to be truly noble. In the face of overwhelming odds, he had demonstrated the very best of humanity, not through strength alone, but through his unwavering commitment to compassion and moral integrity. Through this journey, the princesses realized that humanity, despite its perceived shortcomings, possessed a unique and powerful trait: the ability to choose kindness and selflessness, even when the cost was high. And in that, they saw not just a protector, but a friend, an equal, and perhaps even a leader who had earned their trust through actions rather than words. The situation had become dire. After all their efforts to escape, the enemy forces finally closed in, leaving them with no choice but to make a final stand. The human, always calm in the face of overwhelming odds, knew this was inevitable. He had anticipated that the relentless pursuit would lead to this moment, a fight they couldn't run from. But he hadn't spent all this time simply reacting. While others might have panicked, he had been preparing for this confrontation from the very beginning. The location he had led them to wasn't an accident. It was a carefully chosen battlefield, a place where their chances, though slim, would be the highest. The human had been setting traps, modifying the ship, and thinking ahead with every move. To the enemy, it was just another starfield, but to him, it was full of hidden advantages. He understood that their superior technology, though powerful, came with blind spots. It was rigid, predictable, and overly reliant on their advanced systems. The human, in contrast, was unpredictable, adaptive, and willing to exploit every opportunity, no matter how unconventional. As the enemy forces began to close in, he activated his plan. Traps, cloaked by the debris of old space battles, began to spring into action. Improvised explosives made from ship parts detonated in precisely calculated spots, catching the enemy off guard. The Lyrians had never seen such tactics before, fighting with the environment rather than trying to outmatch the enemy in pure firepower. The enemy, confident in their superiority, didn't expect this kind of guerrilla warfare. Their sensors couldn't predict the chaos the human had engineered, and their ships struggled to adapt to the rapidly changing conditions. The human used every advantage he could muster. As their enemies pressed in, he outflanked them with carefully timed moves, always staying one step ahead. It wasn't about brute strength or technological superiority. It was about turning the battlefield into a weapon in itself. The enemy's arrogance, their belief that they could simply overpower any opposition, was their undoing. They hadn't expected their prey to fight back in such an ingenious way, and now, they were caught in a web of their own making. But it wasn't just the human who had a role to play in this fight. The princesses, who had learned so much from their time with him, began to apply the lessons he had taught them. They weren't warriors, not by training or experience, but they had seen how the human approached challenges. They understood now that survival wasn't just about having the most advanced tools or the highest status. It was about using whatever you had to the fullest. They began to contribute in ways that surprised even themselves. Using their knowledge of their own technology, they found ways to assist the human, rerouting power, jamming enemy signals, and even using their ship's systems in ways they never imagined before. What had once been a desperate, one-sided chase had now become a coordinated defense, with the human and the princesses working together as a team. The tide was turning, not because of any single act of heroism, but because they had learned to trust each other, to rely on human ingenuity and their own newfound resourcefulness. The battle raged on, but it was clear the enemy wasn't prepared for this kind of resistance. The humans' plan had thrown them into disarray. Every time they thought they had the upper hand, he would shift tactics, exploiting weaknesses they didn't even know they had. Their superior technology, once their greatest strength, had become a liability. It was too inflexible, too dependent on systems that couldn't adapt quickly enough to the chaos unfolding around them. The human, on the other hand, thrived in this environment. Every decision he made, every risk he took, was calculated to push the enemy further off balance. As the enemy ships faltered, the human pressed the advantage. He knew this was the moment to end it. With a final, decisive move, he disabled the lead enemy ship, causing a chain reaction that rippled through their fleet. The battle was over. The human and the princesses had won, not through sheer force, but by outthinking, outmaneuvering, and outlasting an enemy that had underestimated them at every turn. In the aftermath, as the debris of the enemy fleet drifted away, there was a moment of quiet reflection. The human, exhausted but victorious, took a deep breath. He had done what he always knew he could: survive and protect those who needed it. But this victory wasn't just his alone. The princesses had grown in ways they hadn't expected, and they had been crucial in the final moments of the battle. They had learned from him not just how to survive, but how to think, how to fight in ways that defied their rigid upbringing. The princesses looked at the human with newfound respect. Their initial views of him as just another protector had evolved into something far deeper. They realized that humanity's strength wasn't just in their physical abilities or their tenacity. It was in their ability to inspire, to teach, and to fight for something greater than themselves. The human hadn't just saved their lives, he had shown them what true courage, ingenuity, and compassion looked like. For the first time, they understood why humanity had earned a place among the stars. It wasn't because of their technology or their numbers, but because of their resilience and moral compass. The princesses, who had always seen their royal lineage as their greatest asset, now understood that nobility wasn't about birthright. It was about actions, about standing up for what was right, even when the odds were against you. They vowed to take these lessons back to their people, to spread the story of how a single human had turned the tide in a battle that seemed lost, and had done so with nothing more than his mind, his courage, and his heart. In the end, it wasn't just the enemy that had been defeated. The old ways of thinking, the belief that power and technology were all that mattered, had been shattered as well. The human had shown them a different path, one where strength came not just from what you had, but from who you were. As they prepared to move on from this battle, the princesses knew that they had been forever changed by their encounter with humanity. The story concluded with a quiet realization: humanity's true power wasn't just in their ability to fight and win. It was in their ability to adapt, to think beyond the immediate, and to act with compassion and integrity in the face of impossible odds. This, more than anything, was what made humans unique in the vastness of the galaxy. They were survivors, strategists, and most importantly, moral beings who understood that victory wasn't just about defeating an enemy, it was about becoming something greater in the process.